Welcome to the Authentic Change Podcast. I'm Mike Horn, your host, and this podcast is for leaders and coaches who need and want fresh perspectives on what it means to live and to lead authentically. You're a leader who wants to make a difference, but sometimes you feel stuck. You know there's more to life and to leadership than what you're currently experiencing. It can be tough to figure out how to grow as a leader. You might be reading all the blogs and books, but it still feels like you're not making progress. You might even be feeling like you're doing everything wrong. On Authentic Change with Mike Horn, we interview experts who share their insights on how to live and lead authentically. Our guests are trendsetters in building great leaders, teams, and organizations. We provide fresh perspectives on what it means to live with purpose and authenticity. Welcome to this episode of the Authentic Change Podcast. Welcome to this episode of Authentic Change with Mike Horn. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to our virtual studio and to our audience an intuitive, an empath, a warrior. And it's not often I get to say those combination of words at once. Intuitive, empath, warrior, Lauri Smith, whom I'm just absolutely thrilled to have as a guest on this episode as we explore issues related to authenticity, leadership, and just a little bit about Lauri before I ask her to tell her story and describe who she is. She's an intuitive public speaking and leadership coach. She helps visionaries and empaths on a soul-driven mission to stand in their power, speak their truth, and lead. She's the CEO of Voice Matters, and that's a place that you're going to find in our show notes for this episode. But I'll just give a reminder here and a few other places. It's voice-matters.com. And she's the author of Your Voice Matters, a guide to speaking soulfully when it counts. Her mission is to call forth more open-hearted leaders so that they can do their part to change the world with authenticity, creativity, and courage. Lauri Smith, welcome to Authentic Change with Mike Horn. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Tell our audience about your story and what it would be very helpful to understand what these words mean to you and how you give expression to them in your work.
Absolutely. Once upon a time, when I was very young, I think 7 years old, I was playing make-believe in my backyard. I had been making up stories with friends, acting them out. And of course, they were kids. We all were. And they wanted to go on to the next thing. And I wanted to finish the story. So I said, okay, I'll finish the story and then I'll catch up with you guys at the pool later. And my mother walked in and found me with my hair in little pin curls like Cindy Brady from the Brady Bunch. And she immediately took me to an acting class. And theater, like all things in life, theater has both a light side and a dark side. The dark side, much has been made in movies and films about it. It's competitive, backstabbing, dog eat dog. The light side is what I have attracted to myself and loved about it my entire life. In the theater, I found a group, a tribe of people who were able to be deeply present and connected to me and with me in a way that most of the world was not. And there's a creativity there and storytelling and mirroring what's going on in the world back to the people in the audience and to the people in the world. And I was hooked. It took me many years to get grounded in my body and really become good at it. And somewhere in my late 20s, I was working a day job during the day and doing theater at night, and working a day job here in the Silicon Valley, which meant way too much work, way too much go, go, go. And I did have an intuitive urge that was kind of calling me to go toward a more aligned life. And at first, as we all do, I resisted it. And then I had a powerful experience in my acting class with my favorite instructor. Normally in this acting class, we would do improv exercises together, at least two of us at a time, sometimes four of us at a time. So the focus of everyone else was evenly divided. And these improv exercises were not about being funny like you see on Saturday Night Live. They were about tapping into ourselves and stretching the paint colors that we had to paint with as actors. And on this particular day, the whole entire class was focused on me. It was my exercise all by myself. And I kept doing that stuff that so many of us do, kind of putting on the I'm fine mask and wielding kind of energetic armor in front of my heart in between scenes. And Richard Side, my acting instructor, paused the exercise, as he did so many times over the years, and said, stop doing that thing that you're doing where you're like resetting, or I don't know what it is, pulling yourself together, air quotes. And I responded, I'm not that comfortable having everyone's eyes on me. And then he said, well, you've picked a strange set of careers for yourself. You're an actor, you're a teacher, you're a speaker. Part of you wants this. Part of you knows you're meant to be here. And that part of me knew he was right. And I trusted him. So I took the leap and I stopped pulling it all together. I let go of my emotional masks and my energetic armor. And I felt layers of protection melting away as the exercise continued. And by the time it was done, and I looked out at everyone in my class, I could see and feel what kind of a day they had each had. I think it's my first moment of oneness that lasted beyond the acting, where there was no character. And when I look back now, knowing what an empath is and knowing that I am one, that's why oneness that's how it feels to me, as I can take a look at you and I can feel where your heart is in my own body. And that has led to, with more and more clarity, me helping visionaries on their own mission, many of whom are empaths, to let go of their energetic masks and to lead from a masks off, armor down, open-hearted, connected to others place, and become wildly alive from head to toe whenever they're speaking, from stages to small meeting rooms. And I absolutely love what I do. And I know that part of what makes a speaker or a leader great, what allows them to unleash their own unique, innate charisma, is letting themselves be seen the way that I discovered back in that exercise.
Yes, and so many. Well, thank you first for sharing that story and taking us to its origin and into the present state of your work as an empath and as a coach to others. There's so many interesting points to pick up on, and I hope I'd like to explore some of them. And they may come in the way that I heard them as well. So I'd like to, make sure I am understanding, and that for our listening audience, that the concepts are clear as we relate it to what it means to bring more of who we are to what we do, to bring our best to every situation, and to believe that we're all in a process of development. So you talked about being present and connected. In my work, I talk a lot about presence, and I don't mean executive presence, even though I think that's important for many of my clients and those whom I coach. I'm prepared to talk about this topic of presence. But presence, I'd like to understand for you what it means to be both present and connected, and how that informs your work.
Being present means being in this moment, feeling something that's here in this moment, feeling your toes, connected to my own body and connected to you, seeing your facial expressions, hearing the sounds of things that are around. Not present is standing here talking to you and thinking about, what am I going to say in 3 minutes? What am I going to do when I get off this call? Oh, shoot, I forgot to do this thing. That is one way that not being present shows up. And then present and connected is present and connected with myself, and present and connected with you and out in the world. Who else is around in the space? And are we truly connected to them? And they're really linked. If I'm off thinking about what I should have done before I came here with you, I'm not connected to you. I might be looking at you, but I'm not really seeing you. And I've often called it connect truly, madly, and deeply, to try to convey that it's beyond just making eye contact with another person. It's almost like there's a visceral sense of plugging in to the other person, having a conversation that's a silent one underneath the verbal one that we're having.
I was fortunate at one point to work with one of the world's leading adult developmental psychologists. And what I always believed he was able to do, as I experienced him, and as I experienced him interact with others, is an uncanny ability to sort of size up a situation and have deep insight within the first minute or so of meeting another person. And I wonder if that, if you feel some of that, or if your clients experience some of that as well.
Yeah. For me, I don't know that within the first 2 minutes, my conscious mind can translate what it is that I'm picking up on. I'll get energetic sensations, and sometimes it is that fast. One thing that I didn't say when I was sharing my story, you just made me think of a student of mine in a theater class is essentially, this moment is responsible for where my career led, or it's one of those moments. I did not know what coaching was. I was teaching theater. I was trying to do it like the other teachers. And she came up to me and she said, "You're different. When you trust yourself, instead of professing your knowledge like from the podium, you're more like a coach. You're on the same level with us. You're being curious. You're trusting your intuition." And she said, when you trust it, you look like you're reading people's minds, and you're drawing the best performances out of them when you do that. She said, you can't tell because you're not in all of the classes. I am in all of the classes with them. And you really look like you're reading people's minds. And I say this for all of us. It was what felt like breathing to me. And I assumed if what I was sensing and noticing was valuable, someone else would have said it for most of my life. until I then, at her suggestion, went and took my first coaching class. And through the process of learning what coaching was and how my intuition worked, I realized, oh, no one else is saying it because they're not taking it in the same way that I am. One thing in particular, someone told me it's called clairaudience, like clairsentience or clairvoyance. Sure. I was doing a coaching thing during certification, and I was coaching and the room was listening, and I was coaching the leader. And when we were done, she paused everyone and she said, Lauri, how did you know to go to this car thing that was mentioned? And I laughed and I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, no, I want you to articulate for everyone else. How did you know to go there? And I said, well, it sounded like there was the oral equivalent of a neon sign around that. And she asked the rest of the class, did you hear it that way? And they all said no. And that was, oh, so I do get intuitive hits. And it's not always the moment I meet someone, something that I can access in my conscious mind. I just kind of stay with what am I feeling? And then something will pop up that's an intuitive blurt to share.
I remember in some training I did in shamanism and working with a shaman, the idea of the ancestors and being able to sit out in the desert and to have, you could see certain chairs carved in the rocks to gaze at the stars, a way of recalling that we're certainly more than this moment. And I want to explore with you just a bit about the topic of resistance, because it was part of your story. What is the role of resistance, and why do people sometimes resist a calling? I've experienced a lot of visionaries who have too many ideas.
Me too. Yeah. What is the role of resistance? I wish we could get rid of it. And sometimes I wish we could get rid of it. I just shot a video about the soul suckers, which to me are the inner critic.
I see.
They often show up as resistance. And one thing I believe to be true is a tricky thing about this resistance or that kind of protective inner critic soul sucker energy is when it comes up, it actually means we're really on to something. Otherwise, the resistance wouldn't be there. The part that's trying to protect us would just be bored with whatever it is we're doing. And when we can learn to realize, oh, if my resistance is coming up, I'm drawn to this thing and I feel resistant to this thing, that means there's something big here. There's something juicy, some change that we're meant to undergo, some transformation, ultimately into a new version of ourselves. I believe that's part of why it comes up. And I wish we could get rid of it. And yet I'm now at the point where I know if it comes up, it probably means it's going to be amazing when I'm on the other side of whatever transformation it is.
In my training or in my development as an organization development scholar practitioner, I learned some important things about resistance. One is that it just is. And there are so many ways for us to approach it, whether we can make some creative use out of that resistance, whether we can appreciate it for its protective and curative values, we can ignore it and break through it somehow. So these are some of the ways that I appreciate resistance and understand that in order to eat resistance, and that's not the right word, neither is overcome. In order to alter resistance, perhaps, you do have to have a number of things that have to drive momentum. As another organization development scholar said, you have to have vision, you have to have dissatisfaction, you have to be dissatisfied with the status quo, and you have to have a series of actions or a series of steps that you take in order to overcome resistance. And I also believe that's true. And as a result, many people don't. And as I studied a long time, we acquire our immunities to change, and understanding how we approach them and why we hold on to them, and at sometimes that adds significant cost to our growth and development. So I also love how you incorporate the words around stretching and focus. And you had a wonderful expression that I think one of your teachers said, which is stop doing what you're doing, or something to that effect. Can you elaborate on some of that? I mean, how you incorporate how that led to some more body awareness, and why that's important in understanding who you are and how you sit in your own shoes, comfortably in your own shoes, so that you can use your agency in an authentic way.
Yeah. That stop doing what you're doing. In my case, in my work with him, in the very first part, I had such ingrained habits that he was looking for a way in. And he finally gave me a list of things that I was not allowed to do. And it's come back around a few times. What I remember happening creatively is that I now know about neural pathways and things like that. I had one route that I was used to taking as an actor and in my life. High power positions, defensiveness, fighting. And he was giving me scenes where the character was in a low power, asking for help state. Something I worked on in acting, something that I then learned in life. And the list that he gave me for that one was, you may not speak in declarative statements. Everything out of your mouth must be a question. You may not order anyone around. You can ask. So strict. And I remember one moment when the person in the scene, of course, her job was to try to poke at me and pick a fight. And I would see white with that old choice blocked. It was like, there's just nothing there. It's like, I'm seeing white, I'm blank. And I just sat in the blankness. And eventually I got so creatively frustrated that I found the other options. And one of them, in a scene, I was pulling some curtains closed, and she said something like, let's talk about the fat thing, because she knew that at that point I was feeling overweight. I had mentioned it. And the instructor could see my back, and he said, I wish I had a video of it, because it is the clearest example I've ever seen of someone wanting to go their old route and figuring out how to go the other way. It was like they saw fire come up my back when she said it. And then I closed the curtains, turned around, and sort of melted. And then went a more open, vulnerable direction. And it's not the only time in my life that somebody has said, okay, let's get at this by you're not allowed to do the old habit. Just don't for 7 days and see what else you come up with. And I've used things like that with my own clients. Let's take this thing that is your strength off the table. And when you're not allowed to do that temporarily, let's see what else comes up.
I was particularly captivated by your remarks on trust and the desire to be seen, not in a negative way. I often think about it is, as someone else said, that we all seek to be understood, right? And for you, really, the quest for many of us in life is just to be understood. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how you capture that in your work. I was thinking about contrasting that with desire to be seen, and perhaps it's one and the same.
I feel you're right. It is about being understood. And in order to be understood, we have to let others see us and understand us. And it's funny, when you said that, I realized when I described the moment of oneness, after I allowed them to see me, I understood them because I could feel, and I believe they were seeing and understanding me as well. And my favorite way of doing this in my work is in small groups. Because
let's say some more about that.
Yeah, because we put on our emotional masks and our energetic armor and block others from really seeing us and having the chance to understand us in community. It's the world that taught us maybe it's not safe to really be me. Maybe I should try to pretend that I'm happy all the time. So when I work with a group of people in a small group, their system, their bodies, get the chance to show up another way where it's intimate and safe, and it's also not just one-on-one. And then they learn and they believe that they can show up that way out in the real world. And it creates a new body memory of being in community with other people. And then the leap to, okay, now I'm going to go do this out in the world as a leader, where it may or may not be as safe. And I believe what we learn when we do that in the small groups is, I am good enough. I can handle whatever comes my way. That stage fright thing, and the stage can mean I'm in front of 10,000 people, and it can also mean I'm talking to 6 people that I respect. That fight, flight, or freeze thing gets rewritten to, there's something important I have to contribute here, and it matters. And I'm not going to die or explode, or they're not going to explode from this potentially intimate connection with many people.
It's so wonderful to understand how the work of an empath shows up in practicality, and your descriptions certainly add to that. And everyone listening can find out more about Lauri at voice-matters.com. You'll see it in the show notes as well. And I have 2 more questions for Lauri. The first will relate to Lauri's mission, and that is to call forth more open-hearted leaders, so that they can do their part to change the world with authenticity, creativity, and courage. How do we call forth this open-heartedness? And then I have a follow-up question.
Yeah. First, by to borrow a quote, being the change we wish to see in the world, we can call forth more open-heartedness by leading with open-heartedness. And in doing that, we let other people know that they're safe to be open-hearted. And part of why my mission is to call forth more open-hearted leaders, as soon as I started doing the coaching that I'm doing, I knew I wanted to spread this beyond actors. And I worked with coaches to figure out, well, what is it that I'm wanting? And I realized it was working with leaders, some of whom are reluctant. They probably already have the open-hearted half. And they're sitting at home thinking, who am I to lead? So it's calling them forth because their open hearts are exactly what we need to evolve to something new as humanity. And then there are some people who identify as leaders who have a beautiful heart and they don't believe they're safe to share it. And I sort of knew the way for this to ripple to all of humanity is not for me to market to all of humanity. It's to work with visionaries and leaders who also have a soul-driven mission. And as many of those as I can get up leading from that open-hearted place, it's like we're all drops of water rippling out, letting everyone else know it's safe to be open-hearted. And if you want to lead, come lead with us.
Lauri Smith, you bring so many topics that I wish we had more time to explore. And yet, I want to begin to wrap up with this last question, and then we'll do a bit of a close. And the question is about what connects being seen, coming back to this topic, to great speaking.
Great speaking is an intimate conversation. You can't be intimate without being seen. And in order to have that great speaking, intimate conversation, you need to let the crowd see you, see all of you, your heart, your warts, and be in conversation. That is what all quote unquote great speakers throughout history have had. And one of the reasons that I was called to do the work that I do is even back as far as like the 80s, when Saturday Night Live was making fun of the gesture that all the presidential candidates were making. I remember looking at it and kind of going, yeah, it's not the gesture that's making that one person have more charisma. It's that they're being themselves and they happen to make that gesture. So the world watches and decides that someone who's really extroverted and jumping up and down on tables, that is charisma. No, that's that individual's charisma. And then another speaker comes along who happens to be more still when they're present and connected with the audience. And then the whole world will say, oh, you got to work on your hand gestures. You need to be really still. That's charisma. No, that's that person's charisma. What it really is allowing people to see us and feel us while we're also seeing and feeling them while speaking.
Thank you so much for that wonderful description. And it's a great way to begin to do our wrap up on this episode of Authentic Change with Mike Horn. Our guest has been Lauri Smith, intuitive, empath, warrior. And I'd encourage everyone to visit Lauri and learn more about her at voice-matters.com. And there you'll be able to download a free guide and learn how to unleash your presence and to express your vision while it matters most. So, Lauri, once again, thank you for sharing your perspectives, your insights, and your suggestions for leading with more heart openness.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike.
Until the next episode of Authentic Change with Mike Horn, stay well.
Thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast. I'm delighted that you've tuned in to listen. Please visit the show notes for links to topics discussed in today's podcast. To download a free ebook on authentic change and leadership and to subscribe to my newsletter, please visit mike-horn.com. Once again, mike-horne.com, mike-horn.com. Once again, thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast.